Here are my random thoughts about how Georgia fared against Kentucky. Uh, Going into that game, I told people that it was going to be closer than the Vegas thought. The 24 points was an absolute joke. I understand that Kentucky got blasted by South Carolina, who almost beat LSU. Not that that matters, but again, there's no way that Kentucky was going to play that badly twice in a row. And if you look at the South Carolina game, it was an just orchestra of bad things happened for the Kentucky Wildcats in that game. They weren't going to play that bad twice at home, especially with their backs against the wall. So this is a thing of I told you so. It's just historically Georgia's not played well up there. It's just the way it is, and also Georgia has struggled in its first SEC road game the last 2 years. Missouri, Auburn, you win by 4, you win by 7. You're just not quite in gear when you go up there, but you did win. Everything that could go wrong for you pretty much did go wrong for the Bulldogs, and they still won. 42 straight singles regular season victories, 28 SEC regular season victories in a row, 15 wins in a row over Kentucky. Uh, Again, I know it's not what everybody wanted, but you can't get those numbers without having some close wins. So that's what they did. Where I was really surprised, what I did not predict, and what just shocked the absolute hell out of me was watching Georgia's offensive and defensive lines get pushed around. Georgia got no push on the offensive line. This is supposed to be one of the best offensive lines they've ever had. Did not happen. Tate Ratledge going down, that probably had a lot to do with it. But at the same time, this was happening before Tate Ratledge was out. And then on the defensive line, you know, the defense. Let's say this about the defense: the defense held Kentucky to 4 field goals. The last field goal, Mark Stoops is getting hell for not going for it and kicking a field goal. I think if he'd gone for it, like what 4th and 2, they were getting 5 yards at a clip. I think he should have gone for it. That's just me. Then later on they punted, and that killed the game. He's getting a lot of grief for that. But so give Georgia's credit, or defense credit. They've not given up a offensive touchdown in 4 games going back to the 63-3 ass kicking of FSU. So no touchdowns this year. 3 points, and 12 points. I mean, you've given them 18 points in 3 games. That's bloody fantastic. But they were getting pushed around. Now, granted, you had a bunch of defensive linemen who were out of the game. I get that. But just yards after contact, guys getting hit, and getting into the backfield, having a shot on the running back, and then not dropping him there. These Kentucky running backs falling forward, not being able to contain Brock Vandegrift. Just a better tackling team would have gotten Kentucky off the field. Kentucky had drives of 13 plays, 11 plays, 11 plays, 10 plays, 8 plays. There was 1 3 and out. So, then that's on the defense. Now, granted, when they get into the red zone or got close to the Georgia's into the field, Georgia shut them down, held them to field goals. Exactly what you're supposed to do. So, all credit to the defense, but still being manhandled and missing tackles. The second one, which can be fixed, but the manhandling, you have to be a little bit worried about that. Not being able to set the edge. A lot of penalties, drive extending penalties. And that was the other thing that really surprised me about this game. Georgia was like the second worst team in the SEC through 2 games when it comes to penalties. I thought that they would get that cleaned up, knowing that they had to play cleanly on the road. 9 penalties, 85 yards, just absolutely abysmal. Now, one of those was egregious. Apparently, you're not allowed to tackle a quarterback anymore. The roughing the passer call on Jalen Walker was beyond the pale. And a lot of those penalties extended drives that came on 3rd downs. Just ridiculous. So, but being out physical on the offensive and defensive line was absolutely stunning to me. I could do an entire other video on play calling and the Mike Bobo haters and the detractors won't listen to it again. And I'm not here to defend him. I will say this though: if I was calling plays and I call a run on the first play, and the backside pursuit comes and gets him because there's no fear of the quarterback keeping or something like that, okay, well, that tells me how they are committing. Let's take advantage of that. And then I call a screen to the boundary, and I'm screen to the field, and my tight end misses, just whiffs a block, and it goes for a 3 yard loss. That's not on the play caller. That's on your tight end. Fumbles, uh, bad snaps, bad handoffs, missing open receivers, dropping passes when it comes to you, missing blocks on the screen on with a big whiff at left tackle. Uh, Truss on the other side. A lot of bad execution. Again, can be fixed, but very, very disconcerting. Georgia has a lot of really good players on the offense. They did not play great last night. I think Trevor Etienne is going to be a superstar. There are a couple times he didn't follow his blocks. He's trying to make something happen. He bounces outside of his blocks. There was a counter called. You follow your two guys coming. You run right behind them. You as a running back or a wide receiver or whoever's getting the ball. You're like, hey, I got two lead blockers. We're going the opposite direction. And then to run outside them, and they go through the B gap, and you go outside to the C and get killed. That's on you, Bubba. That's not on. I mean, you didn't run the play that was called. So I get it. It was sloppy, sloppy blocks, and Kentucky did everything they needed to do. They kept the ball, kept Carson Beck off the field. I predicted that they would run right at Georgia. That's exactly what they did. When they needed to extend plays, there is a great equalizer in college football. It's called a running quarterback. And Brock Vandegrift, he knew what Georgia's weakness is. Well, any team's weakness is running quarterback. But my point is, he understands the checks. He understands how to play against Georgia's defense. He's been incredibly successful against Georgia's defense when he was on the scout team, when he was the third string QB going up against the second and first team, when he was a second string quarterback, when they go 1 versus 2 and 2 versus 1. He was scoring on the first team defense for years. He has been very good in Georgia's practices. He knows these guys. He knows what they like to do. If anybody could have success against him, it is him. I think people are just, if Kentucky had beaten South Carolina, I think everybody would be like, oh, well, yeah, it's a tough road game. It's the SEC. It's tough up there all the time. But the fact that they got their butts kicked by South Carolina, everyone's thinking, oh, Kentucky's just terrible. And Brock couldn't be the starter at Georgia, so he's not any good. He went 3 of 10 last week. It's not the same. You had Dumas Johnson on the other side going, hey, here's what Georgia's offense likes to do. Here's how we can stop them. They sold out to stop the run a few times. They had great edge containment. Kentucky did against Georgia. They played really well. So you can complain about the play calling. Fair. I complain about the play calling when it's performed as executed and it's the bad call. But there were so many individual obvious mistakes that if I'm Todd Hartley or Mike Bobo up in that press box, in the coach's box, I'm like, what the hell do I call now? Because they're not doing what I'm telling them to do. So that was pretty brutal. Kentucky needed this game more than Georgia did, and they played like it. They had been humiliated the week before. They came out with their hair on fire. There's a loud crowd, and Georgia played very sloppy. And the personal execution, and again, you go into play calling, that's a whole other video, was not great. The defense did okay. The defense did great for only giving up 12 points, but the fact that they got ran over and made a lot of penalties, that kept it bad. And then the offense, when they could actually get a few first downs, the offense looks completely different. Same against the Clemson game. Once you can get into a rhythm, that's great, but you got to start getting into a rhythm early on. I don't understand I know that there's a back and forth going on between Georgia's offensive coaches and the other team's defensive coaches. You're learning what they want to do. You're feeling them out. So you don't go crazy right off the bat because you want to go conservative to find out what their game plan is going to be. And they're trying to determine that in 3 snaps, 4 snaps. But I'm thinking you've got an Arian Smith, you've got Dylan Bell, you've got Dom Lovett. You got some great backs. Supposed to have a great offensive line. I expect to see more. And they'll have 2 weeks to fix it, and then they face Alabama. It's going to be a very, very interesting game. Hey, another running quarterback. Stellar offensive line. Very physical defensive front. It's going to be very interesting.